Commander Jake Morrison walked slowly across the bridge of his ship. The USS Defiance was not like other warships in the galaxy, where other vessels had smooth metal walls and gleaming control panels. The Defiance had patches welded over holes. Wires hung loose from the ceiling in some places. The floor had scorch marks from when the power systems had caught fire last month. Jake stopped at the main viewing window and looked out at the stars. 3 years ago, humanity had discovered they were not alone in the universe. That discovery had not gone well. The first alien ship they met had blown up half of Earth's space fleet before anyone could say hello. The only reason Earth still existed was because other aliens had shown up and stopped the attack. Those other aliens called themselves the Galactic Union. They were the good guys, or at least that was what they claimed. They had rules about not destroying entire planets and not enslaving weaker species. The Union had 47 different alien races working together. Humans were now the 48th member, though nobody seemed happy about it. The bridge door opened with a grinding sound. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez walked in, wiping grease off his hands with an old rag. His uniform was stained with oil and coolant fluid. Danny was a good man and an excellent engineer, but he looked tired. Everyone on the ship looked tired these days. "Commander, the fusion reactor is running stable for now," Danny said, "but I would not push it too hard. Those Krillian power couplers are still giving us trouble. If we try any fancy flying, we might lose main power again." Jake nodded. The Krillian power couplers were just one of many problems with their ship. When the Galactic Union had given Earth the technology to build the Defiance, they had not been generous. Every piece of alien technology on the ship came from a different species. None of it was designed to work together. It was like trying to build a car using parts from a truck, a motorcycle, and a boat. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Commander Morrison to the docking bay." "We have visitors," Jake sighed. More visitors meant more aliens coming to look at their ship and laugh. The Galactic Union loved to send delegations to inspect the human vessel. They would walk around, point at things, and whisper to each other in their alien languages. Jake could not understand the words, but he knew they were not compliments. The docking bay was located in the lower section of the ship. Jake took the elevator down, listening to the grinding sounds the machine made. Everything on the Defiance made noise. The engines hummed too loud. The air recycling system clicked and buzzed. The lights flickered when someone used too much power. Other ships in the Union fleet were quiet and smooth. The Defiance sounded like it was falling apart, which was not far from the truth. The docking bay doors were already open when Jake arrived. A sleek alien shuttle had landed inside. It was beautiful in the way that all Union technology was beautiful. The metal was silver and flawless. The design was smooth and curved. It made the Defiance look like a pile of scrap metal by comparison. 3 aliens stepped out of the shuttle. Jake recognized the leader immediately. High Commander Zeltak was a Vorthak, one of the more powerful species in the Union. He stood nearly 8 feet tall and looked like a cross between a lizard and an insect. His skin was dark green and covered in natural armor plates. His eyes were large and yellow, and his mouth was full of sharp teeth. The other 2 aliens were from species Jake did not recognize. One looked like a walking tree with too many arms. The other was short and round, with blue fur covering its entire body. All 3 wore the formal uniforms of Union officials. "Commander Morrison," Zeltak said in perfect English. The universal translator made communication possible between all Union species, though it could not hide the tone of voice. Zeltak sounded like he was talking to a child who had disappointed him. "We are here for the monthly inspection of your vessel." "Of course," Jake replied. "Welcome aboard the Defiance." The tour began on the bridge. Jake watched as the 3 aliens looked around at the jury-rigged control panels and the exposed wiring. The tree-like alien made a sound that the translator turned into laughter. The blue furry one shook its head and muttered something about primitive technology. Lieutenant Amy Carter was at her post at the tactical station. She was young for a senior officer, only 26 years old, but she was one of the best tactical minds in the human fleet. That was not saying much, since the human fleet only had 12 ships total, and half of them barely worked. Amy looked up as the group approached her station. Jake could see the anger in her eyes, but she kept her voice calm and professional. "Tactical systems are operating within normal parameters, sir." Zeltak leaned over to examine her console. "These weapon systems are pathetic," he said, not caring that Amy could hear him. Humans were given outdated pulse cannons and missile launchers that other species threw away decades ago. How do you expect to fight with such garbage? Amy's hands tightened into fists, but she said nothing. Jake knew how hard she had worked to make their weapon systems function together. She had spent months figuring out how to link Krillian pulse cannons with Vorthak targeting computers and human-built missile systems. It should not have worked at all, but somehow Amy had made it happen. The tour continued through the rest of the ship. In the engine room, Danny showed them the fusion reactors that barely produced enough power to keep the lights on. In the medical bay, Dr. Helen Parker demonstrated equipment that was considered ancient by Union standards. In the crew quarters, the aliens saw rooms that were too small and too hot because the environmental systems could not keep up with demand. Every stop on the tour brought more criticism and more barely concealed laughter. The aliens commented on everything that was wrong with the ship, which was almost everything. They talked about how humans were not ready for space travel and how Earth should stick to farming and simple manufacturing. By the time the tour ended, Jake felt like he had been beaten up. The three aliens returned to their shuttle, still talking among themselves about the primitive human vessel. As their shuttle departed, Jake gathered his senior staff in the mess hall. The mess hall was where the crew ate their meals and held meetings. It was one of the few spaces on the ship that felt normal. The tables were made of real wood from Earth, and the walls had pictures of home. It smelled like coffee and the reconstituted food they ate every day. 43 people made up the crew of the Defiance. They were all volunteers who had signed up, knowing this assignment was considered punishment duty. Most of them had gotten in trouble with their superiors for being too creative or too willing to break rules. Jake himself was here because Admiral Lisa Grant had decided he was too reckless to command a real warship. "I know what they all think of us," Jake said to his crew. He stood at the front of the room looking at faces that were tired but not defeated. "They think we are a joke. They think humans do not belong in space. They think the ship is worthless and we are wasting their time." Danny raised his hand. "Commander, are they wrong? I mean, look at this place. Half our systems do not work right. The other half are held together with tape and prayer. Maybe we really are not ready for this." Jake shook his head. "No, Danny, we are not like them, but that does not make us wrong. We are different. When other species build something, they use the best materials and the most advanced technology. When humans build something, we use whatever we can find and we make it work somehow." Amy stood up from her seat. "The commander is right. I have run simulations of our weapon systems against Union standard equipment. We should not be able to compete at all. But we can, because we fight differently. We adapt, we improvise. We find solutions that nobody else would think of." Dr. Parker nodded in agreement. "Every species in the Union has strengths and weaknesses. The Vorthak are strong and disciplined. The Krillians are incredibly smart. The Zephyrians can fly faster than anyone else, but humans have something none of them have." "What is that?" asked Lieutenant Hayes from the communications station. Jake smiled for the first time in days. "We refuse to give up. When everything goes wrong and the odds are impossible, other species surrender or run away. Humans get stubborn. We dig in and find a way to win." The crew was quiet for a moment, thinking about his words. They all knew their ship was not much to look at. They all knew the other Union species did not respect them. But they also knew something the aliens did not understand. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters for thousands of years. They had learned to make the best of bad situations. "So what do we do now?" asked Steve Johnson, the first officer. Jake looked around at his crew. They were not the best equipped soldiers in the galaxy. They were not the most advanced or the most powerful. But they were human, and that meant something. "We wait," Jake said. "Sooner or later, something is going to happen that tests all of us. When it does, we are going to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of. This ship might look like junk, but it has the most dangerous weapon in the universe." "What weapon is that?" Danny asked. Jake grinned. "A human crew that refuses to quit." 3 months passed since the inspection by High Commander Zelthak. The USS Defiance continued its patrol through the empty space of the Kepler expanse. This was the most boring assignment in the entire Galactic Union fleet. Nothing ever happened here. No pirates, no enemy ships, no excitement at all. Just empty space and distant stars. Commander Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair reading reports on his tablet. The daily reports were always the same. All systems working within acceptable limits. No contacts on sensors. Nothing to report. Jake sometimes wondered if the Union had sent them here hoping they would just disappear into the void. The bridge was quiet except for the usual sounds of the ship. The environmental systems hummed. The computers beeped occasionally. Lieutenant Amy Carter worked at her tactical station, running practice drills on the weapons systems. She did this every day, trying to find new ways to make their mismatched equipment work better. "Sir, incoming message from Earth Command," announced Communications Officer Linda Hayes. She was sitting at her station with headphones on, monitoring all the frequencies they were supposed to watch. Jake looked up from his tablet. Messages from Earth were rare out here. The Kepler expanse was far from home, and it took time for signals to travel this distance. "Put it on screen, Lieutenant." The main display activated, showing the seal of Earth Command. Then the message began to play. Admiral Lisa Grant appeared on screen. She looked tired and worried, which was unusual for her. Admiral Grant was normally calm and confident, even during the worst situations. "All ships in the outer sectors, this is Admiral Grant with Priority Alpha Intelligence. We have detected massive fleet movements in the hegemony territories. Long-range reconnaissance indicates they are gathering ships near the Proxima Junction. This appears to be preparation for a major offensive operation." Jake felt his stomach drop. The hegemony was humanity's worst nightmare. They were the aliens who had attacked Earth 3 years ago. Unlike the Galactic Union, the hegemony believed in conquest and slavery. They had destroyed dozens of civilizations and turned entire star systems into prison camps. Admiral Grant continued speaking. "Intelligence estimates suggest the hegemony fleet numbers over 200 ships. Their likely target is the core systems of the Galactic Union, possibly including Earth itself. All Union forces are being recalled to defensive positions. However, response time to your sector will be approximately 6 standard days." 6 days. Jake did the math in his head. If the hegemony was really planning to attack the core systems, they would have to come through this sector. The Kepler expanse was the shortest route between hegemony space and the Union worlds. That meant the Defiance might be the only thing standing between the enemy and billions of innocent people. "Message ends," Admiral Grant said, and the screen went dark. The bridge was completely silent. Everyone had heard the message and understood what it meant. Jake looked around at his crew. Amy had stopped working and was staring at the tactical display. Linda had taken off her headphones and was looking pale. The other officers on duty all had the same expression of shock and fear. "All senior staff to the ready room immediately," Jake announced. He stood up and walked toward the small room behind the bridge where he held private meetings. His legs felt heavy, like he was walking through thick mud. The ready room was barely big enough for 6 people to sit around a small table. Jake took his usual seat at the head of the table and waited as his officers filed in. First Officer Steve Johnson sat to his right. Amy Carter took the chair across from him. Danny Rodriguez came in wiping grease off his hands as usual. Dr. Helen Parker arrived last, carrying a tablet full of sensor data. "I assume you all heard the message," Jake said. "Helen, what do our sensors show?" Dr. Parker activated her tablet and projected a holographic display above the table. It showed a 3-dimensional map of the local star systems. Red dots appeared in several locations indicating detected energy signatures. "I have been monitoring gravitational anomalies for the past week," Helen said. "At first I thought they were just normal space phenomena. But looking at the pattern now, they match what we would expect to see from large fleet movements. Ships entering and leaving hyperspace create distortions that our sensors can detect, even at long range." She pointed to a cluster of red dots near the edge of the display. "This is the Proxima Junction, approximately 4 light-years from our current position. Based on the size and frequency of these anomalies, I estimate there are at least 200 large vessels in that area." Steve Johnson leaned forward to study the display. "How long before they reach the core systems?" "If they take the direct route through our sector," Helen said, "they could be at Earth in less than 3 days. The Union battle group is 6 days away at minimum. There is no way our forces can intercept them in time." Jake stared at the red dots on the display. Each dot represented an enemy ship full of weapons designed to destroy planets. The hegemony did not take prisoners or show mercy. If they reached Earth, billions of people would die or become slaves. "What are our options?" he asked. Amy activated her own tablet and called up tactical information. "Sir, I have been analyzing hegemony ship designs and battle tactics. Their fleets are organized around centralized command structures. Everything is controlled from a flagship. usually a massive dreadnought. The smaller ships receive orders and coordinate their attacks through this central command system. That sounds efficient, Danny said. What is the weakness? Amy smiled, but it was not a happy smile. If something happens to the flagship, the entire fleet becomes confused. They lose coordination, ships start firing on each other or following contradictory orders. It only lasts for a short time, but it might be enough. Jake understood what she was suggesting. You want us to attack their flagship? Not attack, Amy said. Disable. If we can disrupt their command and control systems, we can create chaos in their fleet. The Union battle group might arrive in time to finish them off. Danny shook his head. Amy, that is suicide. One ship against 200? Even if we could somehow disable their flagship, they would blow us to pieces in seconds. Maybe not, Amy said. She called up more data on her tablet. I have been studying our weapon systems for months. We have equipment from 6 different alien species, none of it designed to work together, but that might actually be an advantage. Hegemony ships are built to defend against standard Union weapons. They might not know how to handle our jury-rigged systems. Helen leaned back in her chair. This is insane. We are talking about one damaged human ship fighting an entire enemy fleet. The odds are impossible. Jake looked around the table at his officers. They were scared, and they had every right to be. This was not the kind of mission anyone trained for. This was the kind of mission that got people killed and ships destroyed. But it was also the kind of mission that could save billions of lives. Danny, Jake said, is there any way to increase our chances? Any modifications we could make to the ship? The chief engineer was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Maybe, he said finally. Our fusion reactors are already running at maximum capacity, but I could overload them temporarily. Create a massive electromagnetic pulse that might disrupt enemy systems. The problem is it would probably destroy our ship in the process. A suicide run, Steve said quietly. Not necessarily, Amy said. If we time it right, if we position ourselves correctly, we might be able to disable their fleet and escape in the confusion. It would require perfect coordination and a lot of luck. Jake stood up and walked to the small window in the ready room. Outside, he could see stars scattered across the darkness of space. Somewhere among those stars was Earth, his home planet. Somewhere else was an enemy fleet preparing to destroy everything he cared about. How long do we have to prepare? He asked. Helen checked her sensors again. Based on the gravitational patterns, I estimate 12 hours before they begin their attack run. Maybe less. 12 hours to prepare for the most important battle in human history. 12 hours to figure out how to turn their broken-down ship into a weapon that could stop an entire fleet. 12 hours to find a way to do the impossible. Jake turned back to his officers. All right, people. We have work to do. Amy, I want you to prepare firing solutions for every weapon system we have. Find ways to make them work together that nobody would expect. Danny, start preparing the reactor overload sequence. Make it as powerful as possible, but give us a chance to survive it. Helen, keep monitoring their fleet movements. I want to know the moment they start moving toward us. What about the crew? Steve asked. Do we tell them what we are planning? Jake thought about the 43 people serving on his ship. They were all volunteers, but they had not volunteered for a suicide mission. They deserved to know what they were facing. We tell them the truth, Jake said. We tell them that an enemy fleet is coming, and we are the only thing standing between them and Earth. We tell them the odds are terrible and the mission is dangerous. Then we let them choose. Choose what? Helen asked. Jake looked out at the stars again. Choose whether they want to run away and let someone else fight, or stand here and show the galaxy what humans can do when everything is on the line. The meeting ended, and his officers returned to their duties. Jake. The alarm started screaming throughout the USS Defiance at exactly Oro 347 ship time. Commander Jake Morrison was already awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what was coming. He had not slept much in the past 12 hours. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of his crew and wondered how many of them would be alive tomorrow. Jake jumped out of bed and ran to the bridge. The corridor lights were flashing red, and crew members were rushing to their battle stations. Everyone knew this was not a drill. They had been preparing for this moment since yesterday's briefing. When Jake had told them about the hegemony fleet and given them a chance to leave, not one person had asked to be transferred off the ship. The bridge was buzzing with activity when Jake arrived. Lieutenant Amy Carter was at her tactical station, fingers flying over the controls as she brought their weapons online. Dr. Helen Parker was hunched over the science station, studying sensor readings that made her face grow pale. "Report," Jake ordered as he settled into the captain's chair. "Contact bearing 27 Mark 8, Helen announced. "Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Sir, it is bigger than we thought." The main screen activated, showing the tactical display of local space. What Jake saw made his blood run cold. Red symbols were appearing one after another as the hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace. Each symbol represented an enemy warship capable of destroying cities. "How many?" Jake asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Helen's voice was barely a whisper. 237 ships confirmed so far. More are still arriving." Amy looked up from her station. "Sir? They are arranging themselves in attack formation. Standard hegemony battle pattern. Their flagship is the massive vessel in the center. That has to be their command ship." Jake studied the enemy formation on the screen. The hegemony flagship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Defiance. It was surrounded by layers of smaller ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns. The entire fleet looked like a deadly flower made of metal and weapons. "Sir, they are hailing us," reported Communications Officer Linda Hayes. "Put them on screen," Jake ordered. He straightened his uniform and tried to look more confident than he felt. The display changed to show the bridge of the enemy flagship. The creature that appeared made Jake's skin crawl. Admiral Krextar was clearly the leader of this fleet, and he looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares. His body was covered in black armor that seemed to absorb light. His head was elongated and skull-like, with glowing red eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. Scars covered his face and arms, each one probably representing a world he had conquered. "Human vessel." Krextar spoke in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. The universal translator made his words understandable, but it could not hide the evil in his tone. "I am Admiral Krextar of the Hegemony Third Fleet. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will be processed for slave labor on our mining worlds." Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define the rest of his life, however long that might be. "Admiral Krextar, this is Commander Morrison of the USS Defiance. I am afraid I cannot comply with your request. This is Union space and we are sworn to defend it." Krextar's laughter was like the sound of metal being torn apart. "One ship against my entire fleet? I have conquered 47 star systems and destroyed hundreds of enemy vessels. Your pathetic little ship will be nothing more than target practice for my gunners." "We will see about that," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Krextar leaned forward, his red eyes glowing brighter. "I have studied your species, human. You are weak and soft. You have no natural armor, no claws, no venomous bite. You should have remained on your little planet instead of pretending to be warriors. I will add your skull to my collection personally." Jake looked directly into those glowing red eyes. "Admiral, you made one mistake in your research about humans. What mistake is that?" "You assumed we fight fair." Jake cut the communication channel and turned to his crew. "All hands, this is the captain. Battle stations. Today we show the galaxy what humans are made of." The hegemony fleet began moving toward them in perfect formation. Their ships were sleek and deadly, designed by a species that had been conquering other worlds for thousands of years. The smallest enemy vessel was twice the size of the Defiance, and their flagship could have carried the human ship in its cargo bay. "Sir, they are charging weapons," Amy reported. "Multiple targeting locks detected. They are going to hit us with everything they have." "Danny, how are our engines?" Jake asked over the ship's communication system. "Running hot but steady, Commander," came the reply from the engine room. "I have the overload sequence ready to trigger on your command. But remember, once I start it, we will have maybe 10 minutes before the reactors go critical." Jake nodded. 10 minutes to accomplish the impossible. "Amy, are you ready with the weapon modifications?" "Yes, sir. I have linked all our systems together in ways that should not work. The targeting computer thinks we have 5 different ships worth of weapons. If we can get close enough to their flagship, I can make their sensors very confused." The first enemy salvo lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked toward the Defiance. Jake gripped his chair as the ship shook under the impact of enemy fire. Their shields flared and sparked, absorbing what damage they could. "Shields down to 60%, Amy announced. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Damage control teams responding." "Take us into the formation," Jake ordered. "Full speed directly at their flagship." Steve Johnson, the first officer, looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Sir, that is suicide. They will tear us apart before we get halfway there." That is what they expect us to do, Jake said. Run away or try to fight at long range. They are not expecting us to charge straight at them like a crazy human. The Defiance accelerated toward the enemy fleet, its engines screaming at maximum power. The ship was not built for high-speed combat maneuvers, but it held together despite the stress. Enemy fire continued to hammer their shields and hull, but Jake kept them on course. Helen, start jamming their communications, Jake ordered. Use every frequency we have. I want their ships to have trouble talking to each other. Dr. Parker's fingers danced over her controls, jamming signals active. I am broadcasting on 17 different frequencies, including some the hegemony has never encountered before. The Defiance plunged deeper into the enemy formation. Ships that had been arranged in perfect order began to shift and move as their communications became unreliable. Some vessels slowed down to avoid collisions. Others tried to change course but received conflicting orders from the flagship. Amy, target their communication arrays. Jake commanded. I want to cut the strings holding this puppet show together. The human ship's weapons fired in a sequence that confused enemy sensors. The Krillian pulse cannons fired first, followed by the Vorthak plasma torpedoes, then the human-built missile systems. To the hegemony ships, it looked like they were being attacked by multiple vessels from different directions. Direct hits on 3 communication relays, Amy reported. Their formation is starting to break apart. Admiral Krextar's voice came over the radio, screaming orders at his ships. But the jamming was working. His commands were being distorted and delayed. Ships began firing on targets they could not properly identify. Sir, 2 enemy cruisers just collided with each other, Helen announced with amazement in her voice. They are both heavily damaged. Jake smiled grimly. Danny, begin the overload sequence. We are going to position ourselves right under their flagship. The Defiance dove beneath the massive enemy command ship. From this close, Jake could see individual weapon ports and armor plates on the alien vessel. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like a work of art designed to kill. Overload sequence initiated. Danny's voice came over the comm. 8 minutes to critical. Sir, once this starts, there is no stopping it. Helen, deploy all emergency beacons, Jake ordered. Make it look like we are launching escape pods. The ship ejected dozens of small beacon drones, each one broadcasting a distress signal. To enemy sensors, it appeared that the Defiance was breaking apart and launching lifeboats. Several hegemony ships changed course to intercept what they thought were escaping humans. Sir, the flagship is trying to ram us, Amy shouted. They are coming about to crush us against their hull. All power to engines, Jake commanded. Take us right underneath their main reactor section. The Defiance slipped beneath the enemy flagship like a fish swimming under a whale. The massive ship's hull passed overhead, so close that Jake could see the details of its construction. Weapon ports opened and tried to target them, but the Defiance was too close and moving too fast. 6 minutes to overload, Danny announced. Reactor temperature is climbing beyond safe limits. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared but determined. They had followed him into an impossible situation, and they were still following him even though death seemed certain. Amy, how many ships are in close formation around the flagship? 47 vessels within the blast radius, she replied. If the overload works as planned, it should disable most of their command structure. And us? Jake asked. The USS Defiance hung motionless beneath the massive hegemony flagship, like a tiny fish hiding under a whale. Commander Jake Morrison watched the countdown timer on his screen show 3 minutes and 47 seconds until reactor overload. Around them, the enemy fleet was in chaos, but they had not yet realized what was about to happen. Sir, multiple enemy ships are converging on our position, Lieutenant Amy Carter reported from her tactical station. They know something is wrong, but they cannot figure out what we are doing. Jake studied the tactical display. The hegemony ships were moving in confused patterns, trying to respond to threats that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Dr. Helen Parker's jamming signals were working better than anyone had hoped. Enemy vessels were receiving conflicting orders and firing on targets they could not properly identify. Danny, how is the overload sequence progressing? Jake asked through the communication system. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez's voice came back strained and worried. Reactor temperature is at 300% of normal limits and climbing fast. The containment fields are holding for now, but I am seeing stress fractures in the primary conduits. Sir, I do not think we can maintain this for much longer. How much longer do we need? Jake asked. 2 minutes and 15 seconds until critical mass, Danny replied. After that, The electromagnetic pulse will discharge whether we want it to or not. Jake nodded. They were committed now. There was no way to stop the sequence without destroying their own ship anyway. In 2 minutes, they would either save the galaxy or die trying. Helen, what is the status of enemy communications? Jake asked. Dr. Parker looked up from her science station with a mixture of excitement and fear on her face. Sir, their command network is completely disrupted. Ships are requesting orders but getting no response from the flagship. Some vessels are starting to fire on each other because they think they are under attack by Union forces. On the main screen, Jake could see the chaos spreading through the hegemony fleet. 2 enemy cruisers had collided while trying to avoid what they thought was incoming fire. A destroyer was shooting at one of its own escort ships. The perfect military formation that had emerged from hyperspace was falling apart. Amy, target analysis on the flagship, Jake ordered. Where is their main command center? Lieutenant Carter's fingers flew over her controls as she scanned the massive ship above them. Command center is located in the forward section, approximately 600 meters from our current position. Heavy armor protection, but I am detecting power fluctuations that suggest their systems are already being affected by our jamming. Good. When the pulse hits, that will be ground zero for the electromagnetic disruption. How many ships will be caught in the blast radius? Amy checked her calculations twice before answering. 63 vessels within immediate range. Most of their command staff and communication equipment will be completely fried. The remaining ships will be cut off from central coordination. Jake felt a moment of satisfaction. 63 enemy ships disabled would be the greatest victory in human military history. Even if the Defiance was destroyed in the process, they would have accomplished something that no one thought possible. Sir, incoming transmission from the flagship, Communications Officer Linda Hayes announced. Admiral Krextar wants to speak with you. Jake almost smiled. The hegemony commander still thought he was in control of the situation. Put him on screen. Admiral Krextar's scarred face appeared on the display, and Jake could see anger and confusion in those glowing red eyes. The alien commander was no longer sitting calmly in his command chair. He was standing and shouting orders at his subordinates. Human vessel, what are you doing? Krextar demanded. My sensors show massive energy buildups in your ship. You will explain your actions immediately. I told you before, Admiral, Jake replied calmly. You made one mistake in your research about humans. What are you talking about? Krextar snarled. Jake looked directly into the alien's eyes. You assumed we would surrender when faced with impossible odds. But humans have a saying. If you are going to go down, you might as well take your enemies with you. Krextar's expression changed from anger to alarm as he finally understood what was happening. You are planning to self-destruct. You are insane. Your death will accomplish nothing. My death will save billions of lives, Jake said. And it will teach the galaxy that humans do not give up, no matter what the odds. The alien commander began shouting orders to his crew, but it was too late. The jamming signals had disrupted their communication so badly that most of his ships could not receive new instructions. The few vessels that could hear his commands were too far away to reach the Defiance in time. 1 minute to overload, Danny announced over the ship's intercom. All hands prepare for electromagnetic pulse discharge. Jake cut the communication with Krextar and turned to his crew. Around the bridge, he saw faces that were frightened but determined. These people had followed him into an impossible situation. And they were still with him, even though they all knew they were probably going to die. Steve, order all crew to emergency stations, Jake said to his first officer. Full radiation protection protocols. Everyone needs to be secured before the pulse hits. First Officer Steve Johnson activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the first officer. Emergency stations, emergency stations. This is not a drill. Secure all equipment and personnel for electromagnetic pulse event. Throughout the ship, the crew of the Defiance prepared for what might be their final moments. In the engine room, Danny and his team made last-minute adjustments to the overload sequence. In the medical bay, Dr. Parker secured her equipment and prepared to treat radiation exposure. In the weapon bays, technicians shut down all systems to prevent feedback damage. 40 seconds to critical, Danny reported. Reactor containment is failing. Sir, even if we survive the pulse, we will have maybe 10 minutes of life support left. Jake nodded. 10 minutes would have to be enough. Either the Union fleet would arrive in time to rescue them, or they would die knowing they had done everything possible to stop the enemy. Amy, Are the enemy ships still in position? Jake asked. Yes, sir. The flagship and its escort group are directly above us. Most of their fleet is within the projected blast radius. Sir, when this pulse hits, it is going to be like setting off a bomb inside their formation. Jake watched the countdown timer reach 30 seconds. Around them, space was filled with enemy ships that had no idea what was about to happen. In a few moments, the most powerful electromagnetic pulse in history would tear through their formation and leave them helpless. 20 seconds, Danny announced. Reactor temperature is beyond all safe limits. The containment field is collapsing. On the tactical display, Jake could see hegemony ships trying to move into position to attack the Defiance, but they were too late and too confused. The jamming had worked too well. Their perfect military coordination was completely broken. 10 seconds, Danny called out. All hands brace for impact. Jake gripped his command chair and looked around at his crew one last time. They had done something that would be remembered for as long as humans existed. One small ship with a crew of 43 people had challenged an entire enemy fleet and won. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, so overload reached critical mass. Every reactor on the USS Defiance discharged its energy simultaneously in a massive electromagnetic pulse that spread outward at the speed of light. The pulse was invisible to the naked eye, but its effects were immediate and devastating. The wave of electromagnetic energy hit the hegemony flagship first, since it was directly above them. Every computer system on the massive ship went dark in an instant. Lights went out. Engines stopped. Weapons powered down. Life support systems failed. The great warship that had been the pride of the hegemony fleet became a dead hulk floating in space. The pulse expanded outward, washing over the escort ships in concentric circles of destruction. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and fighters all suffered the same fate. Their sophisticated electronic systems could not handle the electromagnetic overload. One by one, the ships went dark and silent. Within 30 seconds, 63 hegemony warships had been reduced to floating scrap metal. The carefully organized fleet that had seemed unstoppable was now a collection of powerless hulks drifting through space. But the Defiance had paid the ultimate price for its victory. The electromagnetic pulse that had crippled the enemy fleet had also destroyed most of the human ship's systems. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows on the bridge. The air was filled with the smell of burned electronics and overheated metal. Damage report, Jake called out, though his voice was barely a whisper. Amy tried to activate her tactical station, but nothing happened. Sir, all primary systems are offline. Weapons, shields, navigation, everything is dead. Linda Hayes checked her communication equipment. Communications are down. I cannot contact anyone, not even other parts of our own ship. Steve Johnson attempted to access the ship's status displays. Life support is running on backup power only. We have maybe 8 to 10 minutes of air left. Jake tried to stand up, but his legs were shaky from the adrenaline and stress. Through the bridge windows, he could see the hegemony fleet. The USS Defiance drifted through space like a ghost ship among the wreckage of the hegemony fleet. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the bridge, and the air was growing thin as life support systems ran on backup power. Commander Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair, watching the remaining enemy ships flee into the distance through the bridge windows. Time remaining on life support? Jake asked quietly. First Officer Steve Johnson checked his handheld scanner. 6 minutes and 30 seconds, sir. Maybe 7 if we reduce activity to minimum levels. Jake nodded. 7 minutes to live. But they had accomplished something that would be remembered forever. Around them floated 63 disabled hegemony warships, including the massive flagship that had seemed so unstoppable just minutes ago. The electromagnetic pulse had worked even better than they had hoped. Any sign of the Union fleet? Jake asked. Dr. Helen Parker was working with the only sensor equipment that still functioned, a small handheld device that could barely scan beyond their immediate area. Nothing yet, sir, but our detection range is very limited now. They could be close and we would not know. Lieutenant Amy Carter was trying to restore power to her tactical station using spare parts from her toolkit. Sir, I am picking up some interesting readings from the enemy ships. They are not just disabled. Many of them are completely dead in space. No power, no life support, nothing. The crews aboard those ships are in the same situation we are, Jake finished. Dying slowly as their air runs out. The thought bothered Jake more than he expected. The hegemony were his enemies, but they were also living beings. Many of them were probably just soldiers following orders. not the evil commanders who had planned to destroy Earth and enslave humanity. "Sir, should we try to contact any surviving enemy vessels?" Communications Officer Linda Hayes asked. "Maybe we could work together to survive until rescue arrives." Jake considered the idea. It went against every military protocol he had ever learned, but these were not normal circumstances. Try to establish communication with the flagship. If Admiral Krextar is still alive, he might be willing to cooperate. Linda worked with her portable radio equipment for several minutes before establishing a weak signal. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Hegemony flagship. The scene was chaos. Emergency lighting made everything look red and dangerous. Alien crew members were working frantically with handheld tools, trying to restore power to critical systems. Admiral Krextar appeared on screen, and Jake was surprised by how different he looked. The arrogant, terrifying commander from before was gone. In his place was a desperate alien facing death just like everyone else. His armor was damaged and his glowing red eyes were dim with exhaustion. "Human Commander," Krextar said, his voice much quieter than before. "You have destroyed my fleet. I hope you are satisfied with your victory." "Admiral, I did not call to gloat," Jake replied. "I called because we are all in the same situation now. My ship is dying and I assume yours is too. Maybe we can help each other survive until rescue arrives." Krextar stared at him for a long moment. "You would help your enemies?" "I would help fellow beings who are facing death," Jake said. "The war is over, Admiral. Your fleet is destroyed and mine is crippled. Right now we are just people trying to stay alive." The alien commander looked around at his own bridge crew who were listening to the conversation. Many of them were injured and all of them looked scared. Krextar had led them into this battle, and now he had to decide whether to accept help from the enemy who had defeated them. "What do you propose?" Krextar asked finally. Jake turned to Danny Rodriguez, who had managed to make his way to the bridge despite the failing systems. "Danny, is there any way we could share power or life support with other ships?" The chief engineer thought about it for a moment. "Maybe if we could get close enough to one of their vessels and connect our systems directly. It would be dangerous and probably would not work for long, but it might buy us some extra time." "Admiral," Jake said, "my engineer thinks we might be able to link our life support systems temporarily. It would give all of us a better chance of surviving until help arrives." Krextar consulted with his own crew members before responding. "My engineers say the same thing might be possible. But human, why would you do this? We came here to destroy your world and enslave your people." Jake looked around at his own crew. They were listening to the conversation and he could see different emotions on their faces. Some looked angry at the idea of helping their enemies. Others looked curious about this unexpected turn of events. But most of them just looked tired and ready for the fighting to end. "Because that is what humans do," Jake said finally. "When someone is in trouble, we help them, even if they are our enemies." The next few minutes were spent working out the technical details of linking the two ships together. It was complicated and dangerous, but both crews were motivated by the desire to stay alive. The Defiance slowly maneuvered closer to the Hegemony flagship, using the last of its maneuvering thrusters. Just as the two ships were about to make contact, Helen Parker looked up from her scanner with excitement in her voice. "Sir, I am detecting multiple ships approaching at high speed. Energy signatures match Union fleet specifications." Jake felt a surge of hope. "How many ships?" "At least 20, possibly more." "Sir, it looks like the entire third battle group." On the main screen, Admiral Krextar had heard the announcement. "It seems your rescue has arrived, Human Commander." "My compliments on your timing," Jake smiled. "Admiral, when those ships arrive, they are going to want to arrest you and your surviving crew members. But I will make sure you are treated fairly according to the laws of war." "Why?" Krextar asked. "I would not show you the same mercy." "Maybe that is the difference between us," Jake replied. The Union fleet arrived in a blaze of light as ships dropped out of hyperspace. Jake recognized the lead vessel immediately. It was the UNS Liberator, flagship of Admiral Lisa Grant herself. Within minutes, rescue shuttles were launching from the Union ships and heading toward the Defiance and the disabled Hegemony vessels. The first shuttle to reach the Defiance docked with their airlock, just as life support was down to its final 2 minutes. Jake and his crew were evacuated to the safety of the rescue ship, where medical teams were waiting to treat them for radiation exposure and exhaustion. Hours later, Jake found himself in the medical bay of the Liberator, being examined by doctors who could not believe he and his crew had survived their impossible mission. Admiral Grant herself came to visit him as he was recovering. "Commander Morrison," she said, sitting down beside his bed, "I have just finished reading the preliminary reports of what happened here. 1 human ship against an entire hegemony fleet. It should have been impossible." "We got lucky, Admiral," Jake said. "And we had a good crew." Admiral Grant shook her head. "Luck had nothing to do with it. What you accomplished here will change everything. The hegemony has never suffered a defeat like this. Their entire Third Fleet destroyed or captured by a single human vessel that everyone thought was worthless." Jake looked out the window of the medical bay. In the distance, he could see the wreckage of the battle. Hegemony ships were being towed away by Union vessels. Prisoners were being transferred to detention facilities. The great enemy fleet that had seemed so unstoppable was now just salvage and scrap metal. "What happens to my crew?" Jake asked. "Your crew are heroes," Admiral Grant said. "Every one of them is being recommended for the highest decorations the Union can award. And you, Commander Morrison, are being promoted to Admiral. Earth needs someone to command our new battle fleet." "New battle fleet?" Admiral Grant smiled. "After what happened here, the Union Council has approved the construction of 50 new human warships. They want them all built using the same principles as the Defiance. Mismatched systems, unconventional tactics, and crews that refuse to give up." Jake thought about his ship, the USS Defiance, now drifting powerless among the wreckage. "What about the Defiance itself?" "She will be rebuilt and restored," Admiral Grant said. "The shipyards at Earth have already begun work on her. When she is finished, she will be the flagship of the human fleet, with you as her captain." Jake closed his eyes and tried to rest. In a few days, he would have to write reports and attend ceremonies and meet with politicians who wanted to hear about the battle. But for now, he was content to know that his crew was safe and that Earth was protected. Admiral Krextar and his surviving crew members were being held in comfortable detention aboard the Union ships. They would be tried for war crimes, but Jake had kept his promise to ensure they were treated fairly. Some of them had even volunteered information about other hegemony fleet movements, helping the Union prepare for future attacks. 3 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of the rebuilt USS Defiance. The ship looked the same on the outside, but everything inside was new and improved. The mismatched alien technology had been upgraded and better integrated. The crew quarters were larger and more comfortable. The weapon systems were more powerful than ever, but the most important thing had not changed. The crew was still made up of humans who refused to quit when the odds were against them. They were still the same people who had followed him into an impossible battle,